Okay, I think we can start. Should we wait for another 1 minute and then we can proceed? We'll let a few people enter and then we can begin.
Have a good session, everyone. See you on the other side.
Okay, I think we can start, and I think as people join, we can just clue them in. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Abhimanyu Chakravarti, and I work for the International Solid Waste Association. We're a global not-for-profit working to make sure that we are able to help the industry, the policy, and the sector in general, waste management sector, transition to a more circular economy. And today I represent the Wood to Wood project. It's a Horizon Europe project, which is trying to develop a comprehensive framework for multi-dimensional cascade valorization of wood, especially coming from the construction and demolition waste. And what we aim to do is that we want to develop this holistic approach that will reduce the demand for virgin materials, reduce the amount of waste that ends up in landfills, and of course, allow for the creation of new value-added products from waste materials. And of course, the idea is to support the transition towards a circular economy by promoting closed-loop systems where nothing goes to waste. And today we are here because we are addressing a central question uh, related to circular economy that is not emphasized enough, unfortunately. And it is really about the people. Who are these people who will actually deliver this circular transition that we speak of? And more broadly, we want to understand, do they really have the skills, the support, and the opportunities to do so? Now, a bit of context before we go in is that we understand that the circular economy in general there's a lot of talk about the circular economy that we need to transition to this sector, but not enough is being done about it. And there's one report that I cite in this is the European Environmental Agency's report that came out in 2025 that said that the environmental economy has been growing faster than the overall economy for over 2 decades now. And what it says is that the policy ambition is real. The investment is, of course, growing in this sector. But unfortunately, the skill shortages are really straining businesses across Europe. And the transition, as we all know, it's not going to land equally for some sectors, some regions, and especially, of course, women face far greater disruption than opportunity. And I think this has been highlighted in multiple policy documents. The point being that this matters because a circular economy that works just on paper but isn't able to really address the concerns of the people who are actually asked to build this circular economy is not a just transition. It is just a transition, right? And this is not good enough. And so today we have speakers from research, industry, academia, regional policy who are working on exactly this challenge from very different angles. And I think that is precisely why it's worth having this conversation. So I'm just going to now briefly take you through the agenda for today, and then we can start with a brief introductions of speakers and the panel discussion. And then we have a small summary and the key takeaways session from today's webinar. So as I said, we're going to right now get into speaker introductions, followed by a small QR code that you'll have to scan to really understand what you think are the latest challenges in building the kind of skills that we need for a circular economy. And then we'll get into a panel discussion, audience Q&A, and then following that for a small summary session. Okay, so these are the four guiding questions for our session today. Um, where are we really, and who is already falling behind? What is actually working on the ground? Are training and education systems fit for purpose? And finally, can we get there by 2030? And can we get there fairly? A brief introduction of our speakers. So we have today with us, firstly, Dr. Jorge Martins, senior scientist at VTT Finland, and he leads the skills and development work in Wood to Wood project. And Jorge brings a foresight and research lens to this webinar, asking not just what skills we need today, but more importantly, what social values and conditions will shape the skills we need for tomorrow. Next, we have Dr. Adam, Dr. Adam Reed, Chief External Affairs and Sustainability Officer at Suez, UK, and former president of CIWM. Adam brings the industry lens and a very frank, experienced perspective on what it actually takes to build a workforce for a sector in transition. Then we have Jasmin Baumgartner, PhD researcher and at the Department of Geography at Vrije Universiteit Brussels. Jasmin brings the academic lens and a focus on the workers that circular economy conversations most often overlook, and those in foundational sectors who actually face not just the skills gap, but a much more fundamental barrier to entering the workforce. And finally, we have Miranda, the facilitator for circular economy at Circular Flanders, with over 30 years at OVAM, which is the Public Waste Agency of Flanders. And Miranda, of course, brings the policy and regional government lens and concrete experience of what it takes to translate circular principles into everyday professional practice at scale. So now, before I hand it over to the speakers, all of you have 8 minutes. So be precise, and then we will bring all of the speakers together for a panel discussion, and then followed by that audience Q&A. So Jorge, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Abe, for the introduction, and I will bring my screen up. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So thank you again. My name is George Martins, and I'm Senior Scientist at VTT, Technical Research Center of Finland. We are a development and innovation partner, one of Europe's leading research and technology organizations. I always like to start with our brand promise, which is beyond the obvious, and this really describes how we think, or at least how we want to be among the brave, making new discoveries and helping our partners and also our customers take a step further. We are a partner in the Wood to Wood project, and there our contribution really is at the intersection of foresight, skills, anticipatory governance, and innovation policy. My intervention today is based on evidence from the Wood to Wood project, specifically a horizon scanning exercise that we've conducted with a very large number of experts, 380 experts. We designed this horizon scanning exercise to explore what future skills may be needed for wood circularity with a time horizon of 2030. And this survey was intentionally multidisciplinary and drawing on expertise from academia, from research and technology organizations, from industry, from representatives of the public sector and civil society as well. And the key argument in my intervention today is that the future agenda for skills and in wood circularity, it cannot be understood through the lens of technology alone. Actually, the evidence that we've collected from this horizon scanning survey is that it's critical to look at societal expectations, value conflicts, the environmental aspirations, issues like economic inequalities, and also local cultures of reuse of wood as a material. Reuse and repair, those are fundamental dimensions that are emerging in our analysis. So instead of asking what technical skills does the circular wood sector need, I want to shift a little bit the perspective, and I want to ask a broader question, which is what kinds of socially embedded skills will allow circular wood systems to become more trusted, more inclusive, and more viable going forward. So this angle is that we should really abandon this linear assumption that if there are new technologies in place, new types of skills will follow on from those. This is partially true. There are a number of technologies related to wood circularity. If we think of digital product passports, automated sorting systems, any kind of bioremediation technologies, or new engineered wood materials, these are essential technologies. But the wood-to-wood project is uncovering a much more complex picture regarding the future workforce for wood circularity. Uh, Essentially, the future workforce will need to operate in an environment where circularity is not fully socially stabilized. And this is because different groups attach different meanings to wood waste. For some of them, wood waste is a secondary raw material. For others, it's an aesthetic resource. For some, it's a compliance obligation. For others, it is a community asset. For others, it's an economic risk. So there's different dimensions of value at stake. And the skills challenge is complex as much as it is related to these variations in meaning. And this really makes us or directs our interpretation of circular woodwork not just as a technical occupation, but as a form of social mediation across these different meanings that different groups attach to wood waste as a resource. The evidence that we got from the horizon scanning exercise is really interesting because the social and value signals, they are not just an expression of environmental awareness. Yes, there's a huge number of signals that confirm this, but there are also signals that reveal many tensions in how circularity is imagined, especially in this time horizon. So some signals suggest a lot of expectations around ethical sourcing, around transparency and environmental responsibility, but this goes hand in hand with a lot of skepticism, some mistrust, or the perception that environmental concerns are still not seen as economically enabling. All these tensions, they matter a lot for skills because people do not retrain simply because they agree with sustainability in principle. They retrain when roles are credible, when they are supported, when they are recognized, and when they are economically viable. So the data in our horizon scanning exercise is inviting us to see future skills not as neutral competences, there's no neutrality at all, but as negotiated capacities that emerge in these contested domains. What seems to be working is not yet a set or a system of skills that is fully institutionalized. There are pockets of fragile, distributed skills. Circular skills are appearing in practice, and this is happening a lot faster than what we see appearing in curricula, in job classifications, or even in certification schemes. And this is where a notion that we have been working with in the context of the Wood-to-Wood project surfaces or emerges, and that's the notion of socio-technical apprenticeship, to translate this idea that people learn about circularity through participation in communities that are quite local in nature. If we think of what happens in urban contexts, this can be repair events, reuse projects, design experimentation communities, or even activist spaces. These are settings that teach a lot more than just technical ability. They teach a lot about judgment, about when wood is reusable, when it's safe, when it is culturally meaningful, the circumstances when reuse creates value. And this judgment is quite central to future circular wood skills. There's an important gap to address, and that is that we don't necessarily lack long, detailed lists of future skills. I think what I would like to highlight in terms of a gap is we do not yet have the institutional arrangements that are able to recognize and support skills that are hybrid, situated, and very local and of a relationship-based nature. Yes, these skills include technical competence, but they also require a different kind of ability to interpret values, to mediate conflicts, to communicate aspects like traceability, to work with material cultures, to work with groups that would normally not be included. So the key question is not what skills will circular wood need, it's more who will be recognized as skilled, who will have access to learning, and who will benefit from circular transition. And I don't know how I'm doing about time, but I think I'll end here, and I'm happy to continue discussion afterwards. Thank you.
Before we get into the next presentation, I just wanted to ask the audience, there have been some issues that people are facing with the presentation. Can everyone see the screen, the presentation that just Jorge presented, or?
No, no.
Okay, there's certainly some glitch that has appeared, which is preventing people from seeing the screen. Either way, I'm gonna try and, okay, Yasmin is on. So the next speaker is Yasmin. And Yasmin, could you share your screen and I'll try to see if...
Does everyone from the audience see the slide? Maybe, or Abi, could you let me know if it's not working?
Yeah, it's
I only
you shared
see you. Yeah, I only see Jasmine and the presentation in a small screen aside.
Okay, let's try again. And this way?
I can see both your screens adequately on my end.
No. Or Abi, maybe you could share it. I don't know what's the best way to.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is let me share my screen from presentations, and maybe that could help.
Great.
Yeah. Just a second. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, Abby, I can see your screen.
Okay. So.
Great. Am I able to move it for? Oh, yeah, okay, great. Okay, then I'll start now. Thank you for setting it up. Thank you also very much for the invitation to speak here. I'm really happy also to follow up on the previous presentation. I think it connects with a lot of the themes that were already mentioned. So I will be talking today about training and inclusion for circular workforce in foundational sector specifically. I'm a PhD researcher in urban geography working at the Free University of Brussels. And so my research is also focused on Brussels, mainly in specific the construction sector. And so the role of foundational sectors like construction is really also to provide a stabilizing role within the urban economy, both in kind of economic terms, but also socially, the integration of local workers and within the circularity transition, of course, also the reuse or kind of revalorization of local materials. And so this is based mainly on an article that was recently published by us on this topic. And I wanted to start with a picture from fieldwork from a year ago, which was quite a sad reality that showed how it actually happens sometimes in practice, which was Malik from Cameroon, who worked as a masoner for many years at his family site, and then came to Brussels to find a job in construction. He went through ConstruCity, which is the centralized training pool, passed the first round of interviews, and then went on to this technical screening where he had to build a chimney. And unfortunately, after almost 2 hours of this kind of training workshop, he was deemed unfit to be matched with a Belgian construction company, a Belgian one specifically. And so we can estimate that he probably went back into the informal economy to work there, and probably not contributing to kind of the social or sustainability transition within the building sector. And this just shows that in reality, this is often much more complex than we have we position it in policy discourse, but also in academia. The question is still very much, or the debate still focuses on up and reskilling of a workforce that is already present and already engaged within the labor market. Whereas to reach also this 80% of activity, it is very much about people currently at the margins or outside of labor markets. And so for me, the challenge or the idea behind this research was also really to see how this shifting in building paradigms from demolition to deconstruction actually helps to provide this local job creation that is really also named as one of the fundamental aspirations of regional circular economy programs across Europe. And specifically, I wanted to focus here on core circular jobs, so not kind of high-end technical or managerial positions, but really kind of the time and labor-intensive manual work that would emerge from deconstruction, sorting of materials, reusing materials, and so forth. And the construction sector is quite specific in this sense that it is still seen as a contributor to local economy, but also a local employer. Of course, European job postings still considered, in that quite a lot of jobs are accessible without higher education, and also 70%, and this was already years ago in Brussels, was still recruited locally. And so it does present a lot of opportunities in this sense. So my question a bit in research was, who are these people actually looking for construction work, and how can we think about circular training pathways or the organization of the labor market within Brussels? And we see that at the one hand, it is really difficult to distinguish between a labor market organization for construction versus circular construction. So there is actually very little structural change in this area currently. There has been some increasing centralization also stimulated through European directives, but also regional programs that have been centralizing training and kind of providing more sustainability objectives within this discourse. But we still see that job seekers often come from a background, as also mentioned before, of non-linear trajectories, informal work experience, lack of language skills, and so forth, that lead to somewhat of a duality in kind of sustainable construction courses, but also within the work environment, where we have on the one hand more precarious second-tier workers, you could say, that perform the essential construction tasks and are not really familiar or trained in sustainability, versus where we have short-term eco-construction courses, for example, working with clay, that are taken on by highly educated people from designing, engineering backgrounds, and are also not accredited as such, and therefore taken up by these people. And so we see that, as recently also said, that without targeted measures, circular labor markets may actually replicate some of these already existing inequalities. And the question what we can do there, or what good examples we currently see, and I think that's also been mentioned before, kind of reuse and localized community-based centers are quite crucial in this sense. An example from Brussels is Circularium, a kind of circular business park or circular economy hub that we see also emerging more and more across Europe in these post-industrial spaces that provide these local craft and reuse enterprises on, of course, a very small scale. So work integration, social enterprises that not only work with locally sourced materials, but also provide labor market integration through state-funded 1 to 2 year contracts for a small number of people, usually between 15 and 50 in one enterprise. That also provide a large kind of infrastructure behind it, language coaches, counselors, and so on, to guarantee really also a trajectory into the employment market furthermore. Still, there's quite a bit of institutional invisibility within this small bubble of kind of circular social reuse enterprises, and also, of course, a funding reliance on public institutions and the state. And so I feel that this presents a kind of core challenge, which is still that it is very much framed, the discourse, as a kind of activation logic placed on individual workers rather than realizing some of the barriers within the labor market system. There's also accreditation gaps. So, for example, social economy enterprises or these workers there are not recognized as construction workers, while they do work within the same system. And also, of course, informal work experiences are not really counted therein. On the other hand, we also see this kind of lock-in where we do organizations state that they don't train for jobs that don't exist, which makes sense in a way, but yet stops this idea of training actually leading to stable employment pathways. And so efforts mainly remain material focused in this sense. And so where do we go from here? I feel that there's really a need for standardized definitions, as we said, but also professional codes and especially competences to both compare current work with what would be circular work, but also to give workers agency in positioning themselves. And I feel that there also is a need for closer integration between the social economy and the circular economy that overlap quite a lot, but are treated as kind of independent pillars in policy and also funding-wise. And so I feel that there is indeed a need for conversation and collaboration between all these partners, hopefully also stimulated a bit by this webinar. And I think I would like to leave with the question of which actors perhaps or which skills also ought to be recognized to actually lead to a workforce that is inclusionary in this sense. So perhaps thinking beyond what we have already focused on so far. Thank you very much. And if you're interested in more research, please do reach out to me afterwards.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Yasmin. We're currently facing some sort of a issue that we hadn't really factored in. That's why I'm sharing the presentation from my side. Just a quick note to our audience. Can everyone see the presentation that was just presented?
I do now.
Okay. So I think this is how we will approach from here. It's better to share from our side. Okay, so the next speaker is Dr. Adam Reed. And
Thank you, Chair.
Adam,
are you
you
moving the slides?
Yeah, I'm moving the slides.
Okay.
I'm moving the slides.
Right.
So let me.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I'm going to provide you with a bit of a UK perspective. I've got a lot of slides, but most of them are for information after the event, and you can download them, I'm hoping. So next slide, please. UK is in rapid transition. This is just a few details about Suez, which is a global waste management company. But here in the UK, we're a major player of the entire supply chain, from collections to treatment to disposal. And of course, that means that we've got a very large workforce and a constantly evolving workforce. And when you're in a sector that is changing to both public demand, environmental regulatory control and the global economy, you've got to constantly be thinking about what is the workforce of tomorrow, where do we get it from, how do we upskill them, and how do we retain them? Next slide, please. So if you think about waste management in its simplicity, we look after post-consumer misplaced resources. They just don't recognize that they're resources. And so whether you're into collections and treatment, whether you like to process, whether you like to sort and segregate, whether you are a recycler or a composter, the fundamental role of our sector is to take materials from one place, put it in another place where it's got more value, where it can be put back to a second or third use. Next slide, please. So if you think about that as what we do now, and you go, well, where are we going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now? And everything is about more segregation. It's about cleaner materials. It's about more recycling, but it's also about targeting the materials that are going to end up in your treatment so that they're more appropriate for energy recovery or carbon capture. And ultimately, we're seeing much more of the infrastructure in the UK now about reuse, repair, refurbishment, upcycling. And so over time, I'm having to think about a workforce that does stuff that waste managers just didn't do. Next slide. So changing evolution. You think about the circular economy. I joined Suez 8 years ago, and we were already starting to do many of these different pathways, different material streams, different needs, different demands, different customers, different flows. And so when I became president of the CIWM back in the day, my theme was I guess it was the skills needed to deliver the challenge of a circular economy. And it was a recognition that the waste industry was going from a historic landfill disposal into a recycling recovery, and the future would be all about repair, reuse, monostream materials, and advanced processing. Next slide. So these two issues are coming together, and then you start going, well, where are we in the world of tomorrow? The world of tomorrow is things like Amazon. It's the process supply chain. It's the reverse logistics. It's a world that has to live in biodiversity net gain. It has to have synergies across your supply chain. And all of these things require new investment and new innovation, but they're actually innovation that is coming from somewhere else. Brewing and fermenting or chemical processing. These are things that maybe don't live in a waste management world, but will live in a resource management world a few years from now. Next slide, please. So I'm trying to present this world of change because I think it's really important that when you understand about change, you then start to recognize the what do we need and how do we get there. And the UK marketplace is a fascinating one. We're generally underqualified with no qualifications. We're generally very male. We're generally very old, and we aren't very attractive to the next generation who want to be bankers or internet superstars or entrepreneurs. So we've got a big issue, which is a workforce coming to the end of its natural life, and a sector that is demanding very new ways of doing things. Next slide, please. All these reports are available, by the way. The links are in the text. So think about my sector: 135,000 people, give or take, in the UK working in waste and resource management. I'm talking about another 70,000 jobs in the next 3 or 4 years. I'm talking about another 200,000 jobs on top of that by the time we hit 2040. So this is a sector that is not only transitioning, but it's becoming hugely in demand if we can find the right people. And that's what I want to talk to you about for the next couple of minutes, is finding the right people. Next slide, please. Huge opportunities, and yet it's just not on the curricula. It's not being taught at schools. It's not the thing that your 16-year-old chooses to do as an A-level. So what are those roles going to look like? Well, chemists, repair specialists, entrepreneurs, behavioralists, engineers, and of course, people that work in AI. When you add those numbers up, you recognize that our sector is going to be 500% bigger by 2040, 2050 than it is now. And we're already a big employer. So what do those jobs look like? Where are they? Next slide. How do we get people into those roles? How do we think those specialists that are currently working in energy or are currently working in another environmental field might be attracted into waste and resources? And so you have to start to realign who we are. Who do we work with? Who are the end markets for the materials and products that we produce? Because they will have skills. Manufacturers, retailers. This is a space that historically we wouldn't operate in, but actually people with those skills are perfectly aligned to the future of a sector that's going to be very different. Next slide, please. Doing this at pace. All of those roles, you can read this afterwards, all of those roles are roles that are in a circular economy. A finance director, a product designer, a joiner, a director of people and skills, the carbon projects manager. The list is endless because the circular economy is everything in the future. And therefore, anybody that's working in a business that's going to help the transition is good news. You don't need to want to be green. You just need to be working in businesses that are going net zero or going more circular. Next slide, please. And that, I think, is how we reposition our sector as not about green jobs. It's about critical skills in a productive economy that also looks after people and the planet. My sector is currently out for consultation because we're trying to map that trajectory of waste management 101 today and a net zero circular economy of 2040, 2050. You can't map your skills until you map your sector's evolution. What are the big policy drivers? What are the big economic drivers? What are the big material needs? Once you've got that, you can then start to think about skills. Next slide. So having thought about that, you then realize that we're actually in competition. A little World Cup pun here for you. We're not the only sector transitioning, are we? The energy sector's transitioning, the power sector's transitioning, the agroforestry sector's transitioning. Everybody wants net zero. So we're all going after the same people. All of those green chemists or environmental engineers could end up in any one of the 20 sectors. Why and how do we get them to us? Next sector, please. We do that by recognizing that we've got skills, needs that other sectors are already providing. And we also, by working out the transitions of different sectors, you realize that I might need 10,000 behavioralists in the next 10 years. The energy sector needs them in 20 years. So those skills can then be reutilized in another sector rather than all of us trying to create the same new skilled workforces. So you have to understand how other sectors are transitioning, not just your own. We have to work together. Next slide, please. So when you get your head around all of that, you realize that it's all about collaboration. Because if we don't work as industry and academia, if we don't work as training providers and government, we'll end up with the wrong skills in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that won't support a transition, and it won't be economically viable, and it won't be a good news story, in which case people will leave our sector. So we have to understand what is the sector's needs, industry today and tomorrow. How do I get that training provided, academia and training provision? And government, how do you create long-term certainty so we can invest? Because without policy certainty, none of us will invest in training and upskilling. Next slide, please. It's exciting, isn't it? So Are we an attractive sector? The answer is no. The current president of the CIWM, Victoria, came to power just a few weeks ago, and her report mirrors a lot of the commentary that my report a few years ago did. Nobody is looking at the waste industry going, wow, that's a career I want to get stuck into. The circular economy, jazz hands. No, they're not. They see it as an end of pipe, smelly, old school sector. Next slide, please. We need to transition our positioning. Many people, this is some research that was done recently, some working groups, and it's fascinating that many people just aren't looking in our direction. It's not that they don't want to work in resources or waste or circular economy. It's just they're not looking. And that may be because careers advisors, school advisors, university advisors are just not looking in our direction and saying, look at those opportunities. We've got to change that narrative. Next slide, please. So most of the people know very little about us. People never really understand that breadth of all of those roles that I've already identified. The language we use is terribly downstream and a bit dirty. We talk about waste. We talk about rubbish. We don't talk about innovation. We don't talk about sustainability. These are themes that have got to resonate with the children of today and tomorrow. And what we found, talking to the young entrepreneurial types that are coming into our industry right now, they want to know that they're making a difference, but they're also creating careers that are going to be there 10, 15, 20 years down the line. We have to sell our sector better. Next slide, please. Nearly there. Honest.
Adam, sorry to interrupt. Adam, we're running out of time. If you can just quickly wrap up.
Go on, keep going then. So think about what matters to these individuals, because bringing people into a sector with opportunity sounds easy, but it's not if they're not looking at us. They want to know about their careers, their purpose, their opportunities. Keep going. Go on, you can go fast. And so you think about building these narratives, these stories, people who built careers that they can then go, that's a bit like me. I want to be somebody like that. I want to do that kind of role. I can grow a career like that. So we're building this campaign for the next year about, keep going, next slide, about all of these opportunities that will be in our sector 5, 10, 15 years from now. And this is now giving us something to talk to the kids of today about. This is something I can talk to at schools visits. This is something I can put on the agenda in class. Suddenly we're becoming interesting. We're relevant. Keep going, next slide. And that I think is really important for a sector that's trying to reposition itself. So go on, keep going. So that's my message to everybody is our sectors are not sexy, but we've got to reposition and use the right narrative in order to make ourselves interesting. Otherwise, we will fail in our transition. There are more slides available. You can get them later. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Adam. I really like the part when you said that you just need to be working in businesses that are going more circular, and it's not just about green jobs, but critical skills. And I think that's an important segue for which I hand it over to Miranda now. And
thank you, Abhi. Hi, everybody. I'm Miranda. I work as a policymaker and a facilitator on circular economy at Circular Flanders. Circular Flanders is both the responsibility of our Minister of Economy and our Minister of Environment. And our public and private partners, they represent the societal pentagon of businesses, finance, civil society, research, and government. We have a team of 12 to support this network, and our actions are not only in Flanders, or do not only apply on Flanders, but we also work cross-regional in Belgium and also international. The approach is focused on 6 strategic agendas and 7 levers, as you can see here. And one of the levers is the lever jobs and skills. Now, according to Circular Flanders, the gap is not only one of the technical skills, but also one of confidence, network, and the ability to translate. You're going too fast now. I'm going back. Yes. So it's also the lack of the ability to translate the circular principles into daily practice. And that is where the Circular Ambassador Program comes in. It's a training and community building initiative, and that aims on strengthening the green and circular skills, as well within the organizations as through the value change. Through CAP, we train professionals as real circular ambassadors that can translate the circular economy principles into concrete actions. The program, it combines the knowledge with the skills and the networking. So between 2022 and 2025, we had 4 editions of CAP. The last one was an international Train the Trainer edition. And we did all that with the funding of an EU Life project, Smart Life. And good news for you all, we have a playbook with all the presentations that were in the program. It is available free of charge. So you can find the link afterwards in the presentation to ask for the playbook. As the CAP program focuses on the combination of skills and knowledge, we also have developed some MOOCs, massive open online courses on circular economy. So we want to accelerate the knowledge on circular economy. We have a very general MOOC that is an introduction to CE for everybody that is interested. And we also have a MOOC, very specialized for educational practice. I'm sorry to say that until now they're only available in Dutch, but we still plan to translate them into English. So you can also find the link afterwards in the presentation. Now, if you want to find out more about the activities of our organization, you can find our annual reports on our website. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Miranda. Now we're just going to quickly get into the panel discussion. And as I said before, we have 4 holding questions that guide the session. The first being, where are we really? And who is already falling behind? Now, I would like to just remind the speakers that we have another 20 minutes for this panel discussion. And I would also invite the audience to use the Q&A section to just put down their questions, so that could be answered by our speakers at the end of the session. So just to reflect back on what has been said, we've just heard 4 different perspectives on the same challenge. And let me open this conversation with a simple question. Starting with Jorge. Jorge, your research suggests that we're further actually in rhetoric than in social readiness. And I also remember the conversation we had last week at our plenary meeting in Epinal for Wood to Wood, is that you said that we actually need to bridge the rural-urban divide. And that's something that a lot of these conversations are not really addressing. And specifically, you pointed to the fact that, well, in rural regions, specifically for Wood to Wood project, the wood comes from there, but it's actually recycled and upcycled in cities and towns. So could you also just reflect on this question, where are we really, and just share some of your insights?
For the question, and indeed this tension between rural and urban, it has been surfacing, especially at this stage of the Wood to Wood project, when we will move on to design occupational profiles. So a mediating role between these 2 universes is something that we are definitely looking into. But to answer your question here, your question of where are we really and who is already falling behind, generally, I think that we are in a situation where our ambitions may be ahead of our current readiness. If we look at policy, we realize and acknowledge that circularity is very prominent. It's embedded in strategies, in funding programs, in innovation agendas, also in the narratives of companies. But when you look at the people who are expected to make this transition happen, the picture is a lot more uneven. And here it's not just about the urban versus rural divide, it's about the amount of workers, small companies, local communities, traditional industries that are being asked to adapt to new ways of producing, new ways of consuming, new ways of creating value. And they often receive very fragmented support. So they may have access to some information, to some training programs, but not a coherent pathway to help them understand what this transition really means. And that's what really concerns me, that some groups are really at risk of being positioned as implementers of change rather than participants who actively shape it. And this is the case for smaller firms, for workers in traditional sectors, for people in rural regions, those with less formal qualifications. Those are the ones that can easily be left behind if we assume, and that's a wrong assumption, that we are all starting from the same place. We are not. So that's to me the critical question.
That's actually an important tension to surface right now, and I think that Yasmin also brings a very specific angle here, and I think it's on construction workers in Brussels, whom the system isn't reaching. And I think you've done a lot of work in this regard, the social aspect of the circular economy transition. What does your analysis suggest, Yasmin? And do you see any sort of similarities between what Jorge has said with what you've done in terms of social readiness?
Yeah, very much. So I think there's really a readiness in kind of, you see it in university education programs, research that we have, but also at the policy level. There have been also multiple rounds of, for example, programs, Be Circular funding rounds, where then the projects become presented and kind of reunions of different sectors that all present their individual platforms. I find that one of the problems currently is indeed this fragmentation, that you have all these individual initiatives that are really getting spotlight, but then the practices and the kind of knowledge that is perhaps already there is not recognized. So I would perhaps even not position it as who is falling behind, but who is currently just not recognized or kind of pulled into the system. And I think that's also, if we're talking about the building sector, but I'm sure other industries as well, it's about knowledge that has been there in the past as well, knowledge of materials, kind of the workers that they have as well now, but it is perhaps not valorized or accredited or also included therein. And then on the other hand, we see with circular economy programs that they're still very distinct and not really transversal. So we have projects that are supported through kind of spatial planning or redevelopment of neighborhoods. We have programs that are supporting the social economy, then others in the labor market. So I think that we see all these initiatives, but they're not really connected within one holistic approach. So I feel that that is where a lot of knowledge and also skills and workers that are already there and present are being kind of lost or overlooked.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to mention, is that when we speak of the circular economy, we seldom we seldom talk about what happens and who falls within the cracks, right? And I think this is exactly what the whole purpose of this webinar was, is to basically get all of you guys to showcase your perspectives and from different angles and different studies. And I think here Adam can also maybe from an industry perspective tell us, for example, in the circular economy is, of course, competing for talent, with sectors like you mentioned, energy and transport, that are perhaps paying more and offer much more clearer pathways, right? Career pathways. How does the circular economy then address that, Adam?
With great difficulty, and thank you for the tough question. I think you're right that the waste sector historically is been paid less for many of the roles that you could do in energy, transport, and manufacturing, and trying to correct that is really difficult because most people don't want to pay more for their waste management service or their circular economy service. So I think the future is about our services being embedded within the value chain. So we're no longer considered waste managers. We're on site at Amazon helping them with their cardboard, for example, or we're on site in a food manufacturing plant dealing with their offcuts, because suddenly you're much more valued because you're an inherent part of the process. Now, if that means that my sector shrinks because people are embedded in the system, I have no problem with that. I think that's not only how you get better pay, but it's also how you get better change, because you can change so much more from being inside the system than being at the end of the supply chain. So I think the future of the circular economy, and therefore many of these roles, is about being embedded in sectors that are already transitioning because they have to transition.
Oh, that's a really succinct and, like, of course, well said, because I think it's important for us to see what sectors are actually taking the lead in helping this circular transition. And I think, Adam, I come back to your point is that as a labor force, we need to also keep an eye out for businesses that are actually working to make sure that we get to net zero. So I think that's our cue, right? And I think that with this, I'll also hand it over to Miranda. I think, Miranda, the Circular Ambassadors Program is an interesting sort of a point where you see professionals within organizations are already trying to basically upskill themselves, right? And you're providing the tools in that sense to help them, sort of uncover what this circular economy transition means. So my question to you is that does the CAP, for example, I know that it starts with professionals that are already inside organization and sort of builds outwards from there. But does this approach really reach people that other initiatives miss? Or are you also facing very similar barriers like others?
Yeah, I think it does to some extent. And what I like about CAP is that indeed it starts with people who are already inside the organizations. So these people are very close to decisions and projects and conversations where circular economy can become very concrete. For example, if you are working in procurement, you may not see yourself as a circular economy expert, but still you influence choice about materials. So in the program, we bring together people from different sectors, different roles and also different levels of experience. And we also include students and social enterprises. And that mix is very important because it creates connection between people who will otherwise never meet. We think so. And of course, it's not that we don't see barriers because time, resources, and confidence remain real challenges. But because we are making the training practical and accessible and community-based, I think we can lower some of those thresholds.
Yeah, I think that's something that I sort of realized is that with the first question that we answering is that the rhetoric definitely is kind of taking more space than actual readiness. And like also Adam mentioned and Yasmin mentioned as well, that structural barriers, of course, remain unchanged. And we are also competing for talent with better paid sectors. And I think what you're saying now is also that confidence gap is something that is also as much as a skills gap. So with that, I will also come to the next question, which is that uh, what is actually working on the ground? And I would just like to just give a cue to our speakers that please keep your answers very short because we're short on time. So I'll start with Jorge. Jorge, you said that what often works is local and more practice-based activities rather than much larger systemic ones, right? So can you give a concrete example of that?
Yes, to put it as short as I can, I think people learn circularity also by doing. They learn through experimentation, trying new things, collaborating with suppliers, customers, community organizations, and through sharing these experiences with peers. If we look at what's happening with repair initiatives in maker spaces, any kind of circular business pilots that involve cross-sector collaboration, these all create environments where new skills can emerge in a more organic matter. I think this is actually what can work on the ground.
And I think that Yasmin, you also sort of mentioned something similar when you said that person-centered trainings and trajectories and language courses are possibly a very important link that we are missing. And I want to ask you what makes that approach work in your perspective?
I think it's about sensitivity to local contexts, be it spatially also the kind of neighborhoods that people are living in, for example, but also proximity to their living places, work and living places close together. And as Miranda also mentioned, the kind of confidence, fostering the confidence of people who have been perhaps in and out of the labor market. So we are talking about the most precarious groups in a way. But nevertheless, I think it's a confidence in the kind of skills they have and language, but also in these small enterprises, what I found was that usually they go away from highly specialized tasks. So whereas in, I don't know, ethnic reuse enterprises, for example, they usually perform a very specific task. Thereon, they get a larger view on what they can do and also thereby a larger view on materials and sustainability that I would say then fosters also this understanding of sustainability within themselves. So I think it's this local sensitivity to both people and the kind of context that we are working in, urban and material.
Adam, over to you. Is there something that you can add on or provide a fresh perspective from the industry side?
I mean, I think I agree with a lot of what's been said. Some of this is about narrative, and some of this is about, you know, the naming that we use. But in reality, I just think clarity is what's needed in a lot of this. It's clarity about what we want, where we're going, why we need it. It's clarity about the scale of that opportunity, because that's what makes us attractive. Understanding the scale means there's something in it for everybody. Well, that then means you can start to talk about specific roles or niche roles or very technical roles or more general roles, and people that can move between sectors or between skills types. All of that can be mapped out, but in reality, I think we've just got to build the fact that this is a huge transition of opportunity.
Yeah, indeed, it is a huge transition of opportunities. And like you very well said, this is also something that I keep hearing from Brussels, is that clarity is required. And I think that I'm going to now bring Miranda in to understand, for example, to build on what you said, Adam, is that the circular economy is as economic, behavioral, marketing, and it's not just technical. And I think Miranda can come here and say, for example, what the Circular Ambassador Program does in that sense. Is there any ingredient that makes the CAP, make more attractive to professionals, and how is it actually changing people's practices after the training ends?
Well, for us, the key ingredient is the combination of knowledge, practice, and community, because we think people usually don't change their way of work simply because they heard a good presentation, but they will change if they can test ideas on real life cases, discuss them with other peers, and build the confidence to take action in their own organization. So CAP brings useful skills for this, such as design thinking, storytelling, stakeholder management, etc. And because they also work in the multidisciplinary groups, they really experience the kind of collaboration that circular solutions actually requires. So at the end, when they leave our CAP, they don't only have more knowledge on circular economy, but they leave with a network and shared language and practical tools, so they can mobilize others as real ambassadors.
Oh, that's a very fresh perspective, and I think that I'm gonna use that as a link to move on to the next question, which is a third guiding question, which is, are training and education systems fit for purpose? And of course, some of your answers will be overlapping, but I'd still ask, for example, the fact that from what I heard today, your answers are very clear. There is a consensus that we are not there yet. Adam, you, for example, said traditional skills are important, but no for what the circular economy actually needs. So there is this gap that we're seeing. Yasmin, you definitely said no, it's not, we are nowhere there. And you, Miranda, you said that as long as they treat circular skills as an add-on, which is somewhat unfortunate, we will not be there anytime soon. So I'm going to ask this question to, for example, Jorge. What is your analysis on this one, on this question?
It's a problem of assuming that if we teach people new technologies, new regulations, new production methods, a transition towards circularity will happen. And that's where training and education systems fail, because that's clearly insufficient. And circularity is a lot more demanding than that. It's a lot about a relational dimension or situational awareness and judgment that does not many times have clear-cut answers. It requires coordinating across different organizations and across different sectors. It requires a different type of material literacy, so to say, understanding where materials come from, how do they circulate, what value can be retained, what value is lost. and the ability to negotiate between different interests. I think these are dimensions that are currently not captured by our current training and education systems, and that's where change is needed.
I think similarly, Yasmin, you've taken this a bit ahead, and you said that it's of course it's a training conversation, but it's also a job integration conversation, right? So could you also explain what did you mean by that?
Yeah, I think especially when it comes to these core circular jobs, or what we see, this really labor-intensive work, it is usually also at least the idea of reintegrating people that are really outside of the labor market. And so oftentimes it's not as simple as providing a few week short-term courses, but it is about really making sure that there are also opportunities for them and a kind of stable career in training and employment. So I think this is about, yeah, on the one hand, just the construction system or labor market organization in general, that there is a kind of way for them to transition into a stable career and stay within there. And so I think this is just about, yeah, what also people feel they can achieve within the sector, I would say. And yeah.
And Adam, I really appreciate your frank answers, because also from the industry perspective, it's important to really, sort of have an ear to the ground. So could you also just briefly have some analysis on this?
Yeah, I think there's an academic system in the UK and much of Western Europe, which is all geared to producing people that don't actually have many applicable skills in the real world. And that doesn't satisfy industry at all. So then we train them on the job. But what we know is that they've got great analytical skills. They're great thinkers or writers or communicators. And so you train them, but that means you get them very, several years into their career before they're actually ready to be a waste manager. I think that the future is much more hands-on. It's much more involved. It's skills that many of us have not been taught, but need to be taught in the future. The idea of material designers being able to choose between different materials, I think is really important. And yet at the moment, those decisions are not being based on circularity or sustainability issues. They're being based on look and feel. And so educating lots and lots of people to make good decisions is something I don't think our systems are geared up for, because it's, as the speakers have said, it's an add-on, it's a nice to have, it's an optional extra. I think if we're serious about, a workforce of millions in the circular economy, driving economic growth and protecting the planet and communities at the same time, then these people need to be more entrepreneurial. They need to be more hands-on. They need to be more collaborative. They need to understand language, nuance, and storytelling. They need to be good listeners. Actually, is this stuff that we're teaching people in a history degree or in a biochemistry lab? I'm not sure they are. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think there are some really good hands-on, detailed technical engineering type courses that you can get once you're in industry to top up your skills. But do I want to wait till you're 27 or 28 before you're kind of ready? No, why can't I have you when you're 18? And, with lots of passion and a fundamental set of skills that we need, because I think we lose a lot of people from our sectors because they haven't found an easy path in, because they've gone and ended up in another industry because it was better aligned to their degree or their postgraduate course or whatever. That's what's missing, I think, here, is recognizing that, circular skills are things that are in lots of courses, but equally it's just life. And we need to see, people need to see this as opportunity, not, oh, it doesn't fit my history or my English or my geography degree.
Yeah, well said, Adam. And I think this is what also the Circular Ambassador Program that Miranda, you suggested does, is that it's important that the future must be hands-on. I mean, we're not talking about skills that are up in the air. These are real opportunities that exist. And I think CAP does that, right, in that sense. And it's not just about the training. It's not just about the content of the training itself. It is also the accessibility. Can you also just highlight very briefly how the CAP manages to bridge, sort of expectations versus what the reality is?
Yes, we think that the just transition is not only about who can enter the room or the program in this case. So yeah, that's one part of it. And of course, it's very important. So we reduced the fees for students and social enterprises to make the program more accessible. And also we selected our participants with a focus on different backgrounds. So we could get a very mixed group. But in CAP, we also ask ourselves, how can circular strategies create dignified work or include vulnerable groups, avoid shifting burdens to other people or regions? So that helps the participants to see that circularity is not only a technical or an economical question, but also a social one. It's very important.
Yeah, I think we established right at the beginning that our focus of the webinar was to see this whole skills transition and this upskilling pathways as more of a holistic social, economic, technical sort of we take those criterias into account. And I think I love the fact that we're talking more about the social dimension of circular economy, which again, like I said, we keep missing. And I think that brings us to the fourth question, which is also super important, is that can we really get there by 2030? And if so, can we get there fairly? Jorge, what do you think?
We can make progress towards 2030. I think there are many encouraging developments around us. There's a strong policy framework in Europe. There's the Green Deal, Clean Industrial Deal, just transition mechanism. All of these are very useful policy frameworks. They provide important framing, but what needs to accelerate is the investment in people. There's the wrong expectation that focusing on scaling technologies and infrastructure will be sufficient. It will not if communities and businesses feel that change is imposed upon them. And this is where I bring again this dimension of fairness. It's wrong to assume that everybody has the same resources, the same opportunities, and the same starting point. There are asymmetries in regions, in the ways industries face restructuring. There's limited capabilities that certain companies have, especially if we think of smaller firms, if we think of workers whose jobs are transformed. So a unified approach or a one size fits all is not suitable here. Also, something important is that we need to overcome the assumption that expertise is restricted to universities or the traditional centers of competence, research institutes, or government agencies. People working in industries, those networks of repair centers, recycling operations, the community organizations that we talked about today in several of the presentations, they have a lot of practical knowledge about materials, about processes, about the local realities, and all of these are important if we really want this transition to be inclusive, and if we want it to have the knowledge of all these individuals that are part of those communities.
Thanks, Jorge. And just a note to speakers, we would like to also give the floor to the audience to ask questions. So starting from Adam, just keep your answers very precise and short, and then we move into audience Q&A.
Okay, what was the question?
Can we get there by 2030, and can we get there fairly?
No and no. Sorry, you said short. No, because I think 2030 is too tight for some of this transition to happen, even though I acknowledge there is lots of good work happening around the world on this transition, but it won't be done in time. And no, will it be done fairly? Of course not, because the world isn't fair. What will happen is some policies will go early, some governments will go early, some industries will go early, and the investment will go in those directions. So, you know, it's a competitive marketplace in most countries. We will take communities with us on the journey, but it won't be a perfectly fair scenario. Of course not.
Yasmin, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I'm agreeing with everyone so far, I think. It's a very slow and, as I found in Brussels at least, a very experimental approach, I would say. So we're really lacking a kind of structured vision. it is good that we have these experiments, but I think also the point that I still wanted to raise is as well about protecting the workspaces where this kind of circular work would take place. So different industries, but funding. So it works best in cases where people can train close by to where they work, then work in companies that resource materials from close by. So it is also about this spatial proximity and also keeping production, I think, or then circular production in the city, and also transitioning out this linear infrastructure, because what was said is not everyone is having the same resources and starting point, and the same goes also for small and medium enterprises that are trying to further this transition, but perhaps lack the available land or resources to start this really and get it going.
Yeah, the one-size-fits-all approach does not work clearly. And Miranda, your thoughts?
Yeah, I can follow what the other speakers are telling, and but I do think that there are some initiatives that have a multiplier effect, like the CAP program, because we had the CAP trainers. The program can, the approach can travel around the world, and there's still room for local realities and needs. And it's indeed the truth that everybody agrees on the importance of green and circular skills, but the difficulty is in turning it into practice and scaling it.
Okay, I think we've just heard a lot of information from all our panelists, very useful information. And I think now I will just take a few questions from the audience. Okay, so this is for the speakers. The first question is, do you think more legislation is needed to drive progress towards a circular economy? Or can people and businesses be incentivized in other ways to change behavior? Who can take this question?
I'll start. So it's yes and yes, or both. I think legislation, we're a sector that's been heavily regulated for many years, and therefore if you want to change, you need to regulate and set policy that's going to drive the direction of travel. But I think it's not just legislation on its own that gets you there. You can incentivize behavior change with lots of different types of incentives, and I think it's recognizing that industry business change is all about economics. So the right incentives will be just as powerful as the right legislation. But if you don't have the legislation, you'll never bring all of the market up. So we can't have innovation of good practice without the rest of the market moving, because then you just end up with lots of illegality and crime. So what we need is legislation to enforce and support innovation and entrepreneurialism, which is where the more incentive-based solutions, I think, would sit.
Thank you for that, Adam. Does anyone want to comment, or should we take the next question? We have very little time. Okay, so I'm just going to go on to the next question. And the next question is, how can we guarantee that circular solutions are economically feasible? We know that several lifetime extension strategies, such as repurposing of lithium-ion batteries, are not yet economically viable. So the question is, how can we make these circular solutions more economically feasible? No takers for this?
No, I'll go on. I'll start. So if we want circular systems to become the norm, if we want the circular economy to replace the linear economy, then you have to charge for externalities, and you have to make virgin materials expensive. They need to truly represent the costs of mining, emissions, and management. When that happens, the ownership of stuff in the future will be expensive, and people will be much more likely to loan, lease, borrow, refurb, and upcycle. And that is how you make circular, because in all the skills that support that transition will become core, and they will be paid properly because the value chain represents them. At the moment, disposal is too cheap, and it doesn't affect consumers who are buying stuff from whichever online platform they choose.
Okay, thank you for that, Adam. I think we're just 1 minute before we end the webinar. I think we're short on time, but we can just take one last question before I summarize. This question is, from your experience, what is the best methodological approach to building a comprehensive green jobs database at the national level? Should we start from sectors and official occupational classifications, or from actual environmental contribution of specific tasks and activities? Is the question understandable by the speakers?
Yes, I can have a go at maybe contributing to that. I think traditional classifications, they are useful, but they somehow tend to be backward looking, or they tend to capture established economic structures. So we need to complement that. And maybe using existing sector or occupation classifications as a foundation would be a good starting point. But that needs to be expanded and built on. It needs an additional layer that maybe is more activity based and that can assess what the environmental contribution of specific tasks is. So asking questions like, how does this activity contribute to resource efficiency, to waste reduction, to product life extension? Because if we don't superimpose this layer on existing traditional classifications, there's the risk that we systematically exclude or undervalue workers who are already contributing to making the circular economy possible, and they will not be fully part of this.
Is there anything that the other two speakers would like to add from their perspectives? Okay, I think we're out of time, but I'm just going to quickly summarize the session. I first of all would like to thank the speakers for being so supportive towards this webinar. Very important discussion we've had today. And I also apologize to some of our audience who've not been able to see some of the presentations. It was really a last moment glitch that came up, as usually happens during these really important events. But the good thing is that we will make this recorded webinar available on our Wood to Wood YouTube channels, of course, and I will send all of you who've registered for this the link so you can, of course, watch it later on. And just a quick summary is that I think a lot of things have been said today. And what I understood from these conversations is that the knowledge exists, the tools exist, and in many cases, of course, the motivation is also there to make this circular transition as inclusive and as just as possible. What is lagging behind? Also, the link that is not really there is the connection between them, like the sectors, the institutions, and the communities that the transition is actually supposed to serve. So yeah, I think on that note, I would really thank everyone for being a part of this. And if you'd like to stay in touch, you can scan the QR code and yeah, follow our page and you'll find all the information there. And I will send you an email with the YouTube link. So thank you so much for joining and thank you for your time. Have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you.